Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Still Guns, and welcome to the Weapons of Dead Space. For 10 long years now, I have been an outright fan of this series, and it pains me that there hasn't been a new one in, well, 6 years now. However, just because it hasn't had a new release in 6 years doesn't mean I'd like people to forget about it, and so that's why I'm making this series on the Weapons of Dead Space. For those of you who don't already know, the vast majority of Dead Space's weapons are repurposed mining tools. In the last video I talked about the Plasma Cutter, a tool used to cut through softer minerals into small, manageable chunks. But Dead Space does indeed have purpose-built weapons, and this is the first one we'll be talking about, the SWS Motorized Pulse Rifle. In the original Dead Space, it is unlocked as soon as you enter the first store in the game, as seen here, and it takes 15 power nodes to fully upgrade. In Dead Space 2, the schematic for the pulse rifle is found in the same room that the train sequence ends in Chapter 2. It has a slightly different upgrade path, which means it takes 22 power nodes to fully upgrade. In Dead Space 3, you can find the blueprint for the pulse rifle much later on in the game, towards the end of Chapter 9. The purpose of the pulse rifle is quite simple, really. It's an electrically powered assault rifle used for security operations, not to mention military use as well. The SWS Motorized Pulse Rifle is specifically designed for use aboard spaceships and space stations, as the ultra-low caliber rounds that it fires lack the penetration capabilities required to breach ship hulls. Instead, the rounds mushroom on contact with unarmored targets. However, this means that the pulse rifle is a lot less effective against necromorphs than something like the Plasma Cutter, requiring many rounds in order to sever just one limb. There are two main variants of the pulse rifle, one of which is split into two sub-variants. On the left is the 26th century SWS Motorized Pulse Rifle, and on the right is the 24th century Sovereign Colonies Pulse Rifle. The SWS was used by security forces both on the USG Ishimura and Titan Station. SWSs aboard the Ishimura were optimized for shipborne security, utilizing a unique 360-degree firing mode that was particularly effective in the narrow corridors of starships. Aboard Titan Station, this firing mode would have been a lot less effective, and it was replaced with a grenade launcher instead. On the more modern SWS, this grenade launcher was equipped seamlessly into the pulse rifle's design, but on the much earlier, older Sovereign Colonies design, it was far more crudely just slung underneath. The Sovereign Colonies design was a lot more crude and mechanical than the much sleeker 26th century SWS. Its three barrels had to be mechanically moved into a firing position, whilst the SWS was built like that. The primitive nature of the Sovereign Colonies design also shows in its ammunition capacity, holding just 25 rounds by default, whereas the more modern SWS holds 50 rounds by default. Even when fully upgraded, the Sovereign Colonies Pulse Rifle can only hold a maximum of 76 rounds. In comparison, a fully upgraded SWS holds 175 rounds, 99 more than the weapon of 200 years before. Ironically, the older pulse rifle is better at grenade launching than the newer one, as its grenades feed from a separate ammo pool, a feature the SWS lacks. Otherwise, the grenade launchers are quite similar in capabilities. By default, both rifles hold 2 grenades. When fully upgraded, they hold 7. The pulse rifle is a good weapon, but it lacks the versatility required to effectively counteract necromorphs. Its low damage can be quite crippling, especially in Dead Space 1, where even on lower difficulties, fully upgraded Pulse Rifle struggles to dismember necromorphs. It is at its most versatile in Dead Space 2, as not only does its primary fire get a lot better, but its secondary fire also becomes a lot better. The grenade launcher capable of a lot more damage than that silly spinny around thing. In Dead Space 3, it both loses effectiveness owing to its lower ammunition capacity, but also gains it thanks to higher damage and its grenades feeding from a separate ammo pool. Whilst it certainly has a place in Dead Space 3, it is in my opinion outclassed somewhat by its military engine counterpart, the Bullpup rifle. But that being said, you cannot go wrong with a good old pulse rifle. Should you wish to build your own and you don't have the blueprint on hand, they can be created from a heavy frame, a military engine and repeater tip as the upper tool, and a survey charge with a default tip as the lower tool. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that. There is one unique pulse rifle tip in Dead Space 3, the Marauder tip, but that will also be covered in the same video as the other plasma cutter tips. The video for Dead Space 3 unique tips. The next video will be on the flamethrower. Do let me know if there's anything I can do to improve this series. I'll catch you in the next one, and until then, good night.